couple announcements, and we'll jump into the content. So the first announcement, labs 4 and 5. I gave feedback on lab 4. So if you have any questions about your feedback, please see me after class or during office hour. Just whenever you get a chance, really. I tried to be clear on the feedback, but if something's a little bit confusing or you're not quite sure how to address something, do let me know. Also, if you're not satisfied with your grade, let me know about that as well. I don't know why you wouldn't be, but you know. The other thing I'm going to say is Friday is going to be a discussion day. So make sure you come to class with everything read. So it's going to be that week 2 article. I should call it discussion 2 because we've only done discussion 1 so far, right? And we just did that online, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email that out just so everyone has read it and they come to class prepared. It's only a handful of pages. I think it's around 10 pages. It's not, incredibly long, but it's an interesting story about eBay. So I highly encourage you to read that prior to coming to class. You need to be prepared for discussion days. Apart from that, we don't have the next lab due until April 8th. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to lecture over SQL, and then we'll actually come back after spring break and we'll start doing SQL. So today is just kind of getting the theory behind everything established. Also, I was looking over the schedule, and I realized I had a lab day on Monday after spring break, and the lab's not due until April 8th. So I think it makes sense to just do what's called a synchronous learning day, or asynchronous, I mean. All right, and that's what it means to cancel class, but I can't use the term cancel class. Does that make sense? So we're not going to do anything that day. Is that cool? So take a little, yeah, exactly. Take a little extra time, get back into the groove of things, that sort of stuff. Anyone have any problems with that? I didn't figure, but always got to open it up for objections. All right, any questions before we begin? So again, just to remind everyone, it's pretty vital that you take notes, okay? Now with SQL, there is a link inside of Canvas that has a tutorial. And it kind of lists off all the things you need to know with SQL. So you're not going to be completely up the creek without a paddle, but it's good to take notes regardless. So just a reminder, today is all about the theory behind SQL, and then we'll actually begin doing it after spring break. I kind of thought that made sense when I was making the schedule. That way, we're not starting a bunch of stuff right before spring break. Does that sound good? Anyone object? As always, feel free to object. All right. So, we'll be covering a general overview of what SQL is. Okay? We'll give the basic query structure that we use. Okay, we'll talk about some operations we can use in SQL. We'll also be covering set operations, as well as handling null values, discussing aggregate functions, nested subqueries, as well as database modification. So really, what we're doing today is we're basically going over the entirety of what we're doing for the rest of the semester, except for the project, of course. And then we'll begin to actually apply it after spring break. So just to recap the different terms of databases. So, tell you what, would anyone mind if I went and grabbed some slips for bonus points? Anyone mind if I did that in the middle of class? I should have thought of this sooner. So, give me just a minute, I'll be right back. All right, let's play a little review game. As always, first hand I see gets to be called on. If you get it right, 3 points on exam 2. So when we had an ERD, okay, which element of the ERD becomes a table? Yeah. Okay, entity's exactly right. So when you have an ERD, you have the entities, those become tables. Again, first hand I see. So when you had an ERD, what element of that becomes a column? Okay, attributes right. Okay. What element of an ERD becomes a row? An instance is correct. You guys studied, didn't you? Okay. So again, we have our entity. That's going to be the table. Okay. We have the columns. Okay. So inside the ERD, those columns are the attributes. All right, and then the rows, of course, are just the instances. What's another term for row? Yeah, record is right. Okay, and then everything else stays the same. Okay, so we still have relations. Okay, we still have primary and foreign keys, and we still have composite keys. All right, so really what we're doing, we're converting an entity that turns into a table. Take the attributes, they form our columns. Okay, that's all we're doing here. Does that make sense? All right, there's a lot of text. A couple things you need to know here. Okay, the first is going to be the char, C-H-A-R. What this is the character data type. So it's a fixed length character. So how you assign the length is you have open and closed parentheses. You put whatever integer you want here. So let's say you want to do a char 2. Okay, that means you're going to have a character data type that's 2 characters long. So this would be quite common for like a state, okay? Because when you have a state abbreviation, how many characters are they? They're all 2 characters. That's exactly correct, okay? So that's what we're talking about there. It's a fixed length. Now we also have what's called a varchar, okay? That stands for variable length character. Okay? And you can assign the max length with a varchar. Same way you do with a char. You open up parentheses, put in whatever integer you want, and close the parentheses. So for example, let's say that I wanted to have a name. Okay? Are all names the same length? Okay, they're not. So if they're not all the same length, are you going to go with char or are you going to go with varchar? Okay, varchar because it's a variable length. Okay, so what we're saying is we're taking that variable length and we can assign whatever max length. So for name, maybe you'd want to use 12. Okay, maybe you'd want to use 15. Okay, maybe you want to use 17. All right. You assign the maximum length. That means that if something goes beyond that, the information is simply not stored. Okay? There's not too many people with names much longer than 12 characters, right? It's pretty uncommon. Not to say it doesn't happen, just to say it's uncommon. All right? So these are both text data types. Does everyone understand that? So you can put text inside of them. All right? So text, of course, being any character at all. So it could be A through Z. You can also put numbers inside of them. However, they're not a numeric data type. Okay, the first numeric data type to know is int. What do you think int might stand for? Integer, okay? So we know from math classes that an integer is what? It's a whole number, right? What does a whole number mean? It means it doesn't have a decimal, correct? Okay, so there's no decimal in an int. Okay? So if we wanted to use something that had a decimal, okay, you could use a float. So again, the difference here, they're both numeric data types. An int does not have a decimal point. A float does have a decimal point. All right, there are many other data types within SQL. Okay, but these are the 4 that we're going to use for this class. Okay, being an introductory class, database isn't even the entire focus of the class. You can get by with these 4 data types just fine. Does that make sense? Any questions about these 4 data types? Everyone understand how they're used? All right. Let's talk about the basic way to create a table. Okay. So in SQL, you always start off with create when you're creating a table. Now, I'll go ahead and say this as well, and it's important you write this down. The SQL functions and names should all be in capital letters. Okay? The stuff you're putting in should not. So for instance, see how I have create and table? Those are both SQL words, right? Okay? Same thing with primary and key. All right? But everything else is not in capital letters. So you just started off by saying create, and then you say what you're creating. So right now we're creating a table. So we literally just say create table, and then you name the table. So someone throw me a table name. Okay, so table 1. All right, then you open up a parentheses, and then you start listing off your column, followed by the data type. Okay, so let's not do table 1 actually. Let's instead do person, just so it makes a little bit more sense. So we have the person table, okay? And the first attribute of person, or first column of person, may be, say, first name. So we're just going to do fname. And what data type do we think that may be? So we have the 4 data types to pick from. Which one is fname going to be? It's going to be a varchar. And I'm just going to put 12 for the length. Okay, then you put a comma, put your second column. Okay, so second column may be lname. It's also going to be a varchar. Let's make it 15 characters long. Why not? Okay. Some other attributes. I mean, we could continue going, putting additional columns in. All right. So let's put in PID for person ID, and let's make that an int. All right, any other columns you guys want me to add? Anything you're dying to see as a column? I think it's enough. I think you guys get the idea. Okay, so you list off the column, start with the column name, then the data type, then a comma. Okay, once you've added all your columns, okay, you're going to tell it what the primary key is. Okay, so again, it's a reserved word inside of SQL. Primary and key are both recognized in the SQL language, so they're going to be what? They're going to be in all caps. So you just say, whoops, primary key. Okay, and what of these 3 columns, which one of these is the primary key? Okay, so which one of these is going to be unique? Person ID. All right, close off the parentheses for the primary key. Don't forget about this parentheses up here. Close it off, end it with a semicolon. All right, that's how you create a table. Any questions? We're going to do a lot more examples after spring break, but does everyone understand the general syntax for creating a table? All right, so some different definitions. We have primary key. Again, you'll notice all these are all caps, which means they're recognized by SQL. So these are some different modifiers we could put onto our columns if we wanted to. If we define something as a primary key, that means what? What's a primary key? So someone raise their hand and tell me what a primary key is. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of a database, what does that mean, for instance? Yeah, but be more specific. What's it uniquely identifying? So what is an instance in a database? No. So who wants to tell me what a primary key is? Okay, exactly right. It's going to uniquely identify each of the rows in the table. Okay, you understand that? Okay. So that's a primary key. Now again, what is a foreign key? First hand I see. Give a definition. Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a primary key, but usually it will be. So if you had a column inside of this person table, and then you have a column inside of a different table, assuming that the data originates inside the person table, it's going to be the foreign key inside that other table. All right. So references is actually a constraint for the foreign key. So what we say is foreign key, whatever the column is called, references, then we say where it comes from. Okay, so that's all we're doing there. So for instance, if we had person ID inside of an employee table, okay, let's say it originates inside the person table. Okay, we would say foreign key, person ID, references, and then you'd have table name dot person ID. Okay, so that's all we're doing there. And then finally, not null is saying that we cannot have a missing value for this column. Okay, so what I could do is I could say first name can't be null. So after the data type, I literally just say not null. Okay, and what does that mean? Something's not null. It's not blank, exactly right. So null means missing. Not to be confused with zero, okay? Zero and null are not the same thing, okay? Zero means you have zero of something. It's a known quantity, okay? If I say I have 0 Lamborghinis, do I not know how many Lamborghinis I have? No, I know exactly how many I have. I have 0, all right? Maybe someone in here might have a Lamborghini. Probably not, but maybe, all right? That's not null. Questions about any of these? So we've gone over create. We've said it's used to make something new in SQL. Okay? Let's say we have an existing table and we want to insert records into it. Okay, we're going to use insert to do that. So see right here, we started with create. Okay, if we want to insert, we would start with insert. Okay? That's to add new rows to an existing table. Does that make sense? Say we wanted to change an existing row or change an existing record of some kind. You would use the update function for that. So you would just start off the query by saying update. Okay? It's used to edit something that already exists. Okay, so delete. It's going to be used to delete rows. So you can delete rows using the delete function. Okay, and then finally, you can drop tables. So you don't delete a table, you drop the table. So we've created the table person. Okay, we can't say delete table person. We have to instead say drop table person. So drop table person. Always end your queries with a semicolon. Okay, does everyone understand that? So delete is to delete records. Drop is to remove tables. Okay, so we're going to go through the general SQL query structure. Okay, so for pretty much any SQL query we're going to do, you're going to start off with select. Okay, after select, you have a couple different options. You can either say which columns you want to select. So let's say I want to select first and last name. Okay, I would just do fname, comma, lname. Okay, that's certainly one way. The other way is to use the asterisk. Okay, and what the asterisk is going to allow us to do, it's called a wildcard. Make sure you write that down. It might be an exam question. Okay, and this wildcard asterisk, what it allows us to do is to select every column. So if I want to select all the columns from the person table, what am I going to have here? I'm going to say select and then what? Asterisk, exactly right. Okay, how else could I select all the columns from the person table? What else could I do to select all the columns from the person table? So say we can use the asterisk, that's certainly one way. What's the other way? So manually put in all the columns. So I would do first name, last name, person ID. That's exactly right. Okay, after you've done that, say where it's coming from. Okay, so select columns from, it's going to be the table name. So what's my table name? Okay, so my table name is person, right? Okay, that's a basic SQL query. Does everyone understand? Anyone confused? Yeah, we're going to start doing stuff inside of P-SQL after spring break. Just kind of introduces SQL before. That way it'll kind of be a little bit more natural after spring break. All right. So some different functions within inside of select. Now, a couple things are important here. Okay, number one, the order of these are vital. All right, so take notes over the order of this. Okay, also what's vital is what each of them does. So I've already said that select is to identify which columns we're going to want to return. Okay. From is which table we're getting the columns from. Okay. So are we getting the columns from the person table, or are we getting them from the employee table? That's inside of from. Am I going too fast? Okay. The next part is where. And where is where we can actually apply various conditions. So for instance, we could say select first name, last name from person. Then we would say where, and we could say person ID is greater than 1,000. All right, that's just an example, okay? So again, where is where you're applying a condition to only return the records that meet the condition. Does that make sense? So it's kind of similar to if inside of Excel. Then we have group by. Okay, so group by is going to have us perform a grouping of the results. So for instance, let's say that I had a quarter and I were selecting sales from my sale table, and then I use group by quarter, what that's going to do is in the results, it's going to give me for each quarter. So quarter 1, it's going to have its sales. Quarter 2, it's going to have its sales. Quarter 3, it's going to have its sales. And finally, quarter 4, it's going to break it down, give me its sales. Okay. Without doing the group by, it's going to give me the sales overall. Does that make sense? Okay. So group by, whatever your grouping variable is, it's going to provide you with the variables you selected for that particular period. You could also do month there. Maybe you had a data set and you wanted to do an average of people's sales by their first name for some reason. All right, so you would get all the Andrews inside the company. What's their average sales? That doesn't make a lot of sense, but you could do it. Does that make sense? Anyone confused by what group by is? Everyone understands it. It's just the results are going to be in a format that is going to be having for every unique variable of, or unique observation rather, of the grouping variable. You're going to have it like that. Okay? Having is very similar to where. Okay, the difference is that with having we can use aggregate functions. Where you cannot use aggregate functions. So we're actually going to see what those aggregate functions are in just a little bit. But in general, they include stuff like average, min, max, that sort of stuff. Okay, and then finally, order by allows us to sort the results. Okay? So let's say we wanted to order by someone's first name. All right? We would say order by, and then first name, and then that would give the results in order of the first name. Do the same thing with last name. You do order by last name, and then the results would be in order of what? The last name, correct? So this is vital. Anything I need to repeat? Go over again. Yeah. So from tells you which table you're getting the columns from. Anything else? Again, this is vital. All right? If you don't know the order of the select statement, you're going to run into issues. Everyone have this written down. Yeah. So select is saying which columns are you going to return. Okay? So you can either do that by listing off the columns, or what's the other way we could select columns? Asterisk, exactly right. And that's going to select every single column in whichever table we're getting them from. Does that make sense? Anything else? All right, here's math operators. All right, who likes math? Okay, does anyone like math? Any math nerds? Okay, so we have the plus. All right, the plus allows us to add. Okay, we have the minus. Okay, the minus allows us to subtract. Have the multiplication. Now this is a little bit tricky because we've already said the asterisk allows us to use a wildcard. However, if it's inside of parentheses, it would actually allow us to do multiplication. All right. Have division. Okay, so that's going to allow us to do division. You have the not the ampersand. You have the percent symbol. That's going to be to give us a mod. Okay, so the mod, of course, being the remainder for a division operation. Pretty straightforward. You guys probably had that in math. Okay, you got the ampersand. Okay, that's going to allow you to do some concatenation for text. Okay, and then you also have exclusive OR. All right. So basically, we're going to be focused on the mathematic operations up here. We're not going to be as focused on the string operations for this class. String, of course, is another word for text. So with the math operators up here, which one of these data types do you think we can use them on? Okay, so you cannot use any of these first 5 operators on either char or varchar because they're text, okay? Now, however, on int and float, you can use them. All right, so again, we're going to be primarily focused on these first 5 operators here. Less concerned with the concatenation and all the other stuff. So, if you had a question? So basically inside of select, if you just had select star, what's that going to give you? It's going to give you every column inside of whatever table you have in from. Okay, in contrast, let's say I had these columns. Let's say I had sales and profit. All right, well, let's say this is inside the sale table. In contrast, what I could do is I could say select, and then I could open up a parentheses. I could do sales times profit, and that's actually going to multiply sales and profit. Okay, that's quite different than if I had select star. Okay, that would give me the sales and the profit columns. Does that make sense? So this is giving me the multiplied figure of those. Any other questions? Yeah. You can include numbers in them, but they're still a text data type, so you can't perform mathematical operations on them. Okay, that's a good question. And I hope it's not too confusing. But what I'm saying is that with a varchar, you can store a number in it. It's just treated as text. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah. No, we're not actually going to use those in this class, I don't think. That's a good question as well. Like I said, that's getting into some more advanced database topics. We're sticking in the basic mathematical operators. All right, like I said, we're going to skip the string operators. Okay, let's talk about the where clause. So there's a couple different things we can do here. All right, we can use comparative operators. So greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, greater or less than, equal to. You guys familiar with the basic comparative operators? Those go inside of where. So let's go back to our select example where we're using the sale and profit. And let's do a basic select statement where we're only getting where profit is greater than, someone throw me a good profit number. Okay, I heard 800,000. Okay, so if I wanted to select sales and profit where profit is greater than 800,000, here's exactly what that query would look like. So you start off with select, and you say which columns you're selecting. So we're selecting sales and profit, right? Okay, now we say from, which table is that in? Sale, exactly right. From sale, and now finally, we're going to use where. Okay, and we say where profit greater than 800,000. End it with a semicolon. Does everyone understand that? Any questions? So you guys see why the order is important, right? If I put where first, it's not going to know what to do. All right, if I put where before from, that's wrong. Okay, if I put select after from, that's wrong. You have to memorize the order of the select. All right, so null values, anything that's missing, okay? And like I say, you could just put the not null modifier if you wanted to after the data type. So just like we did right here, that's saying that first name cannot be missing. Okay, aggregate functions. These are pretty cool. All right. So some different things we can do. Okay, AVG. Okay, and before I get into this, these could go in two places. They can either go in the select or they can go in having. Okay, so if you wanted to do select the sales from sale having max sale, that's going to give you the max sale, right? Okay, pretty straightforward there, I think. So you could also, of course, select the average sale. You could select the max sale just inside the select. So where can these aggregate functions go? There's two places. Where are they? Select or having. All right, that's why having is up here, because it's saying these can all go inside of the having. So they don't go inside of where. Does everyone understand that? Where is for comparative functions. Aggregate functions go in having. It's a little bit complicated, right? It is a little bit complicated. All right, so here are the 5 aggregate functions. Okay, we have AVG. So I could say select AVG, that's for average, open up a parentheses. And I could say profit. And I would say from my sale table. I could do that. What that's going to return? Okay, that's going to return the average profit, right? You could get that because that's what it's selecting. Another thing I could do, I could say select max profit from sale. What is that going to return? It's going to return the maximum value of the profit column. All right, is this making sense? Let's say I wanted to count how many observations I had for profit. In other words, I wanted to count how many records I had for profit. All right, I could do select count profit from sale. What is that going to do? It's going to tell me how many profit observations I have. So if I have 16 rows and they all have a value for profit, what will my answer be? 16, exactly. All right, so if I wanted to add up all my profits, I can certainly do that, right? I can say select sum, open up parentheses, say profit from sale table. That by itself isn't too useful. What might be cooler would be to do either selecting the sum and grouping by the quarter, or selecting the average and grouping by the quarter. Let's see what both look like. So let's select the sum, open up parentheses, column name is profit, from table name is sale. But we're not done yet. Okay, so we're going to group by and then we're going to say quarter. All right, and that's going to give us this total profit by each quarter. So if we had quarter 1, it's going to give us our total profit. So it's the added addition of all the different profits. Does that make sense to everyone? What is that kind of similar to in Excel? Sum if, right? Okay, because the group by is like the if. All right, we can do the same thing with average. Just say select AVG, open parenthesis, profit from sale. And now if I want to have it be listed out by each of the different quarters, what am I going to put next? Group by, and then what? That is exactly right. Close with a semicolon. So that's the aggregate functions. All right, any questions? Does this make sense? Is anyone confused? I could also put these in having. All right, we've talked about delete. It's how we drop records. So we could start off a query by saying delete, whatever. We're not going to do too much of that in here. Insert, we're going to do some examples of insert next class. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Update allows us to modify existing records. And what's cool, by the way, delete and update, how do you know which record to modify? Okay, what are you going to use for that? Okay, you're going to use a primary key, right? That's why primary keys are important. And then finally, you could say drop table, whatever the table name is, just like we did right here. And that'll, of course, allow you to drop the table, which deletes it from the database. All right. So, just to wrap up, we talked about the basics of SQL. We talked about the basic query structure we're going to use. Talked about the order of the different operators. Talked about all the different operators we have as well. Covered null values a little bit. Went over aggregate functions. We're not going to be doing nested subqueries in here. That's a bit beyond the scope of this course. And finally, we covered database modification. Any questions? All right, again, don't forget to read the article. I'll email it out during my office hour. Make sure you read it before class on Friday. Hope you all have a great day. I will see you all Friday.